Can I tell you that it is my absolute pleasure to be sitting here with Gerry Harvey. Gerry has been a part of my life as long as I've been a journalist, I think. Gerry Harvey, of course, is instrumental in creating one of Australia's great retailers in Harvey Norman. The interesting part about many of you here who have all shopped at Harvey Norman, everyone has, we know it, we know the story about the magic millions that Gerry got into, other bits and pieces of Gerry. But I just wonder how many of you actually know too much about Gerry Harvey himself and about where he grew up and how he grew up and how he got into business. Why was Harvey Norman created in the very first place? What is the inspiration of Gerry Harvey today? And why the hell at the age of...
79.
79?
No, nearly.
You see, you can't count either.
I was sitting next to Joe Carter. He looks older than me, and he said he's 65 or something.
At the age of 78, why does Gerry Harvey keep on working? We'll try and find the answers out to all of that as we go through. Gerry Harvey, welcome to the Australia-Lebanese Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Ross.
How good is this, eh? We get Lebanese food, we get to have a chat to a whole bunch of business legends ourselves. It's not bad, is it?
They're not all Lebanese, mate. There's some nice people here.
Righto, let's start. Let's start, shall we? I want to take you back. Is it true as a young bloke up near Springwood, your family had a terrible situation, a bushfire? How old were you at the time bushfire went through?
About 12.
12. What happened after the bushfire?
There was a big bushfire in the Blue Mountains. That's been a few over the years. Yeah. Our little house got burnt down, and I remember my mother. She was absolutely distraught because she'd picked me up at school at Bathurst, and I'd said, "Will you pick me up?" And then I'd wish she hadn't. And anyway, so I'm hanging on to my poor old mother, and she was devastated. We lost all our money, and then we had to live in a garage for a few years. So
wait, hang on, whoa. Back up.
Yeah, okay.
You can't keep going here. So you actually grew up for a part of your childhood living in a garage because the house was burnt out and that's what the family had?
Well, both my parents ended up invalid pensioners then, so they had no money. It was in those days it was £4 a week each, and I had two younger brothers, and so people make their beds. We actually did make our beds. We built them out of wood, second-hand wood, but it was a pretty tough sort of a thing. I was on top, and the two brothers were in a double underneath, and Mum and Dad were there. And this is a little friggin' garage, you know. So you never invited anyone home because you probably felt a bit ashamed of where you came from, you know. So, but before that, my parents were wealthy. They had a lot of money, but my old man decided he wouldn't work, and he lost it, and had a pub and had a farm. And when his father, he was always shitty on his father because they had about 7 or 8 kids. And he said, I never got my fair share, and the others all got more. But his father was actually pretty smart because he knew that my father would just lose it anyway, so why give it to him? So, and I figured that out when I was 12, 14 or 15. I figured out, I thought, I know, Dad, I know why you didn't get the money, you know? But he was always shitty on it. And so he had 6 kids, 3 from a previous marriage and 3 in my... So he said, I just want one of my kids to come good one day. And none of them did except me. And he died before I did, so it didn't friggin' matter anyway.
So, all right, so from that beginning, you end up, you get into university, don't you?
Yep.
But you drop out of university. Why do you drop out of university?
Because I hated it. Every night you'd go to these frigging lectures, you know, accountancy and economics, and it was as boring as batshit. So, and I'd grown up thinking I'm going to be an accountant or something, and then I'm thinking I'm not going to ever do that. I hate it. And so I came up in the world. I became a door-to-door salesman.
You did?
Yeah, knocking on doors.
So why did you do that?
Because I saw an ad in the paper one day and it said you can earn 10 quid a week. And I thought I earned 5 quid. So I thought I'll apply. So I went over. door-to-door salesman. Thank you very much. See you later. And then they talked me into having a week and starting, and I did, and I saw people making £100 a week. And I thought, I better stick at it. And I did. For 6 months, I was useless. I couldn't sell anything. And then one day it all clicked, and I became their best salesman ever. I was making £200 and £300 a week when the average wage was £8 or £10 a week. And
hang on, whoa, back up. How did you make £200 or £300 a week? How did you become the best salesman?
Well, I kept watching the others, and they were selling and I wasn't. So I thought, if they can do it, so can I, but I couldn't. And then I started to get into a routine. I figured out you've got to have a routine, and you've got to know when to trial close, and then trial close again, and finally get the sale. And I was 18 at the time, 19. And so I clicked, it all clicked. And then suddenly I'm earning £200 this week, £300 next week, £100. And that was a lot of money in those days. But it's not a nice job. So after about a year, I thought I'd got to get out of this, and TV had come along, and then I started to sell TVs on leads, and I was making the same money. You roll up at someone's house. I had a big ranch wagon at the time, and I'd have the TVs in the back, pull it out, put it in the house, and I'd make just as much money, You want a TV? Yeah. And we had, in those days, it was Goodwin's of Newtown. No one here's ever heard of it. But we had 4 years interest-free. And years later, 30 years ago, I started interest-free when interest rates were 17 and 18%. And I remember the first time, and that was all from that way back in Goodwin's when I was a 19-year-old. And I had a third deposit, 12 months interest-free. And I financed it myself. I had enough money to finance it for a couple of weeks. But the queue was 100 metres long. We were selling like crazy. And then I'd run out of money, and I think, but it's 12 months, I've got a third deposit, there's more money coming in, and 2 or 3 weeks later I do it again. This is 30 years ago. So I did it with my own finance company. And then the bank came along and said, have you ever heard of securitisation? I said, I've never heard of that. What is it? We can get your money. I said, oh, well, I'm very interested now. So they'd just done a deal with John Simons on Aussie Home Loans and doing securitisation, the beginning of securitisation. So I think they charged me $400,000 to do all the paperwork, and it filled a room, not as big as this. And we had securitisation. Then I went mad. I was doing interest-free all the time. And that really kicked Harvey Norman along. That was 30 years ago.
30 years ago. All right, we're going to go back a step, though. Tell me about Ian Norman.
Ian Norman was a mate of mine, selling door-to-door. I bought him his first car. I bought him his first suit. And then I went into business with him. And he worked really well for the first 4 or 5 years. Then he retired and never came back to work again.
It's unbelievable. So that was how Norman Ross was created.
Well, it was Harvey Norman in the beginning, and then the next door was Norman Ross, and the next one was Norman Ross, and a few years later it was all Norman Ross. And then when I started again in 1982, I went back and found the name Harvey Norman, so I started again as Harvey Norman.
All right, let's go in between those times, though, because one of the all-time suggested legends, or the family at least was anyway, John Walton comes and buys out Norman Ross, doesn't he?
Well, it was 1982, and we went public in 1972, and in that time we'd multiplied everyone's money by about 15 times, so we were pretty successful, Norman Ross. 42 shops, and in 81, 82, it was a bit of a recession around that time. Yeah. And we had Grace Brothers that wanted to buy it, Alan Bond, Waltons, because Alan Bond had Waltons control at the time. And I didn't like Alan Bond.
I know that.
And I said publicly that he's a crook.
Right.
And
he's also dead, so we can say he's a crook as well. That's no problems at all.
I told him he was a crook when he was alive. But he never disputed it. So if you call someone a crook and they don't dispute it, there's a fair chance you're right. Okay? And so he'd accumulated shares in Norman Ross, then he'd warehoused them in the UK, and I'd complained about it and no one listened to me. But he was getting away with things in those days that no corporate citizen should ever get away with. And because he got away with it, you then suddenly had a whole heap of others that started to do it. So if you go through the 70s and the 80s, the corporate crooks in Australia and New Zealand, they were everywhere. And you can name them one after the other. And Bond was the biggest of the lot. And he, by example, the others followed him. And the people that are around here that lived through those periods, you all know it's true. You know the names of all those people.
Righto. I'm going to put it out there. I've said this to you before, I reckon. But I think that Harvey Norman and the success of Harvey Norman and the reason why you keep working today so hard is ultimately driven by the fact that you hated Alan Bond so much. Is that true?
No, not at all. But I did hate him so much. But no, it's not. It's. I ask myself, when you're turning 79, why do you want to grow your business so much? And a couple of people that you've got to look at is Rupert Murdoch, and...
He's got Gerry Hall to go to bed with every night.
I tell you what, I was funny, because I was sitting down next to Rupert and Gerry Hall, and I said to Gerry Hall, how's it going with Rupert? And she said, oh, it's very good. I said, what do you talk about? And she said, oh, everything. I said, oh, you talk about music? No, not really. No, Rupert's not into music. I said, what about sport? No, I'm not into sport particularly. What about fashion? Oh, I love fashion. Rupert's not too much into that. I said, what about politics? Oh, Rupert loves his politics. Trump's on the phone all the time. I said, what do you mean all the time? Oh, 3 or 4 times a week, 2 or 3 hours at a time. He's on the phone, always talking to Rupert. I said, what do they talk about? Oh, Trump's got this list of people. And who's going to go where? Who's going to get this job? Who's going to get that job? I said, Rupert advises. Sure, Rupert's advising. So then Rupert's girl, she's a really nice girl. I met her at she was on his board, Elaine Chow. And Elaine's on the board, and I talked to her one day at Catalina's restaurant for about 2 hours. Really nice girl. 3 Chinese little girls, when they were 5 years of age or something like that, went to New York. And this one became famous, Elaine. She married a Kentucky politician, senator. Can't think of his name, doesn't matter. Anyway, so she said, but my sister became even more famous. She married one of the founders of Facebook.
Seriously?
Yeah. So here's these 3 little Chinese girls, and look what happens. And now Elaine, off the board, by recommendation, I presume, she's now in charge of transport in America. How do you think she got the job?
I've got no idea.
She's a very, very capable woman, okay?
That's right.
But it just goes to show you in life, in case you didn't know, it's who you know, okay? It does help. So if you're here today trying to make friends with people, pick the ones that are going to help you out a little bit, you know? Don't waste a lot of time talking to the shitters that they're not going to do you any good. So.
All right. Bring me back a step. The start of Harvey Norman. Now, we point out that you don't like Alan Bond. We point out you're grumpy because that Bondy's now got your business, Norman Ross. So you decide to create Harvey Norman. And I remember at the time you basically said, we're going to beat ya, we're going to beat... Is that your ad?
You can sing it better than me.
But it's true, isn't it? They were the ads at the time.
Well, what happened is I got out and Grace Brothers owned the business, okay? 3 weeks later, Michael Grace came to me and said, I've got some bad news for you. Alan Bond and is going to take it over. I said, Michael, I spent a lot of time making sure you got this. You're in charge of Grace Brothers. We're going to run Norman Ross. This was the deal. But Bond had threatened him and he succumbed to that threat. So he said, I'm very sorry, I feel bad. I said, oh, well, that's the case. So I did an interview with John Singleton on radio. And on that interview, I said, Alan Bond's a crook. So I got a telegram. In those days, they had telegrams. And they sent me a telegram and said I was sacked. Big surprise. and so that was. But I never met Alan Bond. I can honestly say I've never met him, and never wanted to actually. So.
There's one other point that really strikes me. From even your days of selling vacuum cleaners to then selling televisions, door to door, the one thing that you have always sold is the latest in technology. Now, this is something you've ridden a wave of, from selling big flat screen TVs. So people go from little old boxes in the corner that cost them $500 to flat screen TVs that cost them $3,000, and it keeps on going. Computers, the latest in homewares. It's where you've always been, isn't it?
Well, when I first got into the electrical business, like I opened as an auction. We used to be an auction. We sell whatever you sell at an auction. Doesn't matter what it is, we sell it. But then I started to get lounges and beds and fridges and washers and TVs, and I'm thinking, this is good. So I opened a new shop. That was in 1962, and that was, I thought, this is a cash cow, opening these electrical and furniture shops, and it was. And that really, I opened the next one, the next one, the next one. So by the time 1972 had come along, we went public, I think I had about 13 shops. By the time I got out in 82, I had 42 shops. So when I got out, I didn't know what I was going to do. So for the first 3 or 4 weeks, I thought, and then I drove down Parramatta Road and I saw a site and I thought, I rang up the bloke that had it, Sid Londish, and I said, mate, I'll buy that off you, which I did. And I opened a shop. That was like 2 months or something, 3 months after I got out of the other place. And so that shop was the first shop, and I thought, I'll just have one shop. Don't care, I'll just have one. And then within 8 or 10 months or something, I opened a second one at Miranda. And then I went going, and then it just took over. And now we've got hundreds of shops, and I never planned that. I honestly never planned it. So, I look back on it now, and I think, why did you do that? And then I thought back on the first company that I built up. I thought, because once I get involved in something, I've got to grow it. It has to grow. And so when I was thinking to myself, I'd just have one shop, or then maybe two, it was never going to happen, because whatever happens, I'm always out there trying to make it bigger and better next year. And so when we went to New Zealand, like, I had no intention of ever going to New Zealand. We're the biggest business of our type in New Zealand, and we do extremely well. This year we've just turned over $1 billion in New Zealand. And then I'm in Asia, and I think, like we've got 12 or 14 shops in Singapore, we've got 16 or 17 in Malaysia, and we think we're going to have 100 in Malaysia. And Malaysia's got 31 million people. Australia's got 25. I mean, I went to Sarawak. We opened a store in Sarawak. I've never been to Sarawak. I don't think I've ever heard of it. So I got on the plane with Kate. We landed in Sarawak. And I said, this place looks better than I thought it would be. And the English had got there about 150 years before me. And they'd spent a fair bit of money there. Anyone here ever been to Sarawak? One. Two. It's a better place than you think, isn't it? So we opened the shop in Sarawak 6 months ago or something. It's going like a rocket. And so we're now opening another one. So in Malaysia, there is a lot of possibilities.
All right. You mentioned a name in there on the way through. And I've come to the conclusion that you're a very lucky bugger. You really are. I am. You are a very lucky bugger.
I know that more than you do.
At every turn, right. Because not only do you end up marrying a good sort, and she is a good sort.
Oh, in the paper this morning, the sporting editor said she was outrageously successful. That was when she was on the NRL board and they didn't keep her there. They got rid of her.
Yeah, but she's a good sort and she's smart. She's a former journalist. But she also happens to be a brilliant chief executive. You go and marry a brilliant chief executive, that means you can go and look after your horses.
Only because I trained her. She wasn't that good when she started. The great thing about Katie Page is that when I found her, she started to work for me, but I was living with another woman. And I used to take them both out to lunch. And so I'd be sitting there thinking to myself, I've got the wrong one. So that had to be corrected. And as a few months went by, we fixed that situation, and I ended up with the right one. And so then, because when Kate started to work there, I thought after a couple of months, shit, she's a lot better she's fantastic. This girl's fantastic. And I'd never worked with anyone that good. And so not only was I attracted to her as a female, I was attracted to the fact that she could be a cash cow for the future.
All right, because you were a bit lucky in some ways, because the other person you mentioned earlier, and we haven't mentioned him when we should mention him, is your very long-time friend John Singleton. Now, Singo, of course, it would be also fair to say, is attracted to Katie Page, and he's made no secret of this. He actually, frankly, wants you to cark it so he can marry her.
I know. Well, she refers to him now as the second husband, but that's probably... I don't think she'd ever marry him, even if I went, because she's seen the devastation that he's caused to other women, you know. He's got a horrible reputation. So the other day I saw him, I said, mate, that's a nice big coat you've got on. He had this great big heavy coat, it was cold. I said, that's a nice coat. I was only kidding. And he says, my favourite coat. I said, where'd you get it? New York. I said, He said, no, I was walking down the street, middle of winter, it was cold as hell, and I saw a homeless man with a coat. So I said to the homeless man, that's a good coat. Would you sell it? And the homeless man said, no, I won't sell it. He said, I'll give you $100. The homeless man couldn't give him the coat to him quick enough. Yeah, so he takes it back to his expensive hotel, dry clean it. So they dry cleaned it. Now it's his favourite coat.
He's got a homeless man's coat from New York.
Yeah.
For $100.
And next time you see Singo, ask him how the coat's going. You know?
Right. I'll ask you whether this is true. Is a story I've heard. Is it true one day that Singo rang you up in the middle of the day and asked you whether you were sitting down because he had something very important to tell you? Did he actually want to tell you that he loved you?
I know, he rang me up one day and he said, mate, I've got something very personal I want to talk to you about. I said, He said, no, it's personal, it's really personal, and you don't have to answer and you don't have to, you know. I said, mate, if it's that personal, you can what's your problem? So he said, mate, did you leave me any money in your will? And I said, no, I didn't. He said, I just wanted to know. He said, I thought you might have. I said, no, mate, I didn't. I'm sorry. He said, He said, mate, would you be interested in a proposition? We'll put in 10 million each, right? And whoever lasts out, who takes the 20. And I said, yeah, mate, I'll be happy to do that. Singo's 2 years younger than me, but he looks not so good. So I said, mate, I'm very happy to put in the 10, if you'll put in the 10. The good thing about it, of course, if you die, you don't know you lost the bet, you know. So it's a winner take all, this one. So I've been spending the last 3 or 4 years trying to get him to sign up. But he won't
sign up.
He won't sign up. So as an alternative, then he decided, he said, mate, let's look at this. What about if we get 20 blokes and we all put in $1 million each, right? And the last man standing takes the 20 million and everyone's happy as they die because they don't know they've lost, right? And last man standing. So I thought, that's a good idea. We'll go out and search for 20 people that don't look too good. see if they'd like to join the club.
Okay.
Right?
Is it true that you took Singo to go and see Ian Norman when he was in intensive care and on his last legs, he only had about 5 days to live, and put the proposition to him?
Oh, that is true. Well, the thing is that it's very sad when someone's dying, right? So we went to see my old mate, Singo and I, and when you've known someone all your life and how you behave when you know they're going to die. I don't know how you do that. But poor old Ian he was skin and bone, and so we had to take him to the toilet. And then when you take someone they can't sit down, they can't get down, and then Kate raced down the road to get more toilet gear that you didn't have to fall down so far. But it was at that time that we thought we should invite him into the. So it's like, to be a member, it's not very nice to do that. But I don't know, when you're on your own, I fully expect someone to treat me with very little respect when I'm going, okay? I don't deserve any respect. And that's fine, because I've got a few of my friends lately that have decided they're not going to have a funeral. And I've been thinking about that, because I think, you're dead. Why do you want a funeral? Oh, because it's important that, people can say goodbye and all the rest of it. And I think, I don't really care.
No, that's right.
So, but people have to have a funeral. Why? I don't know. So Singleton's idea is that he's going to swim to sea.
What? He's going to swim to sea?
Well, what you do, you go out as far as you can. And when you're completely stuffed, right, you decide to come home. Okay? But you can't.
But you can't.
No, you can't. So if you want to die, it's a good way to go. And because you're guaranteed to go.
Well, I get all that. All right, I've got another one for you while you're here. Tell me about the fact that you are 78, nearly turning 79, and you haven't retired. What's wrong with retirement?
Well, I constantly look at people that get over 65 and retire, and there's a big lesson there. 9 times out of 10, don't do it. Because yesterday I had lunch with 2 of my old mates, one's 75. He retired 10 years ago. He's a good bloke. He's an old man now. And even when he talks, it takes a fair while for something to come out. And, when you talk to someone on the phone that's old, they sound like they're old. And then I've got my other mate who's 9 years older than me. I had lunch with him a week ago. And he's my model, if you like, because when I talk to him on the phone, he sounds like he's 35. And he's still fine. He's driving his car. He's doing okay. But he's retired. He's not as quick as he used to be. He's still okay. And so I look at him and I think, how far can I get? So I'm pretty sure I'm going to get to 80. I had my physical 6 months ago. I'm in the top 5% for my age, physically. Mentally, I don't know where I am. So I'm physically okay. I want to grow my business a lot. And I've just got to be active all day mentally and physically. And if I can do that, can I get to 90? Can I be sitting here with you when I'm 90 and then I'm doing just as good as I'm doing now?
Are retired people boring?
Yep. Unless you're talking about the trouble is they all want to talk about what happened 100 years ago. But if you're talking to a retired person that's got an interest in, say, whatever it is, horses, let's say it's horses, no, they're interesting, okay? But if they're talking about stuff that, whatever their complaint was, or the doctor or the neighbour and all this shit, you're just trying to get out as quick as you can. Run, So mostly they're extremely boring, yeah.
I'm going to finish this up because I'll take a few of your questions. If anybody's got questions, there's 1,000 stories we could have told here today. We didn't even get to the magic millions and the motivation behind that, because that's a great story in itself about the horses. Can I tell you, when Gerry turned up here today, he said, I've written down a few things and a few dates on a piece of paper here for you if you want to do that. I haven't actually referred to the piece of paper, I'd have to tell you. The only thing I've referred to is the fact he's given me his Roads and Maritime Medical and Driving Test leaflet. Right, why have you given me that?
That was the piece of paper that was closest at the time.
Why have you got this?
Well, because every year when you turn 75, you've got to get a medical, Otherwise, they won't give you a driver's licence. So I have to give them a medical every year now. And then when you get to 80 or 82, you've got to do a driver's licence every year or two or something. So I'm not there yet, okay?
You're not here yet. All right, that's okay. All right, questions. Where are they? Throw me a question, real quick one. If you got a microphone.
So I was at the Magic Millions with the recent sale, and I put up my hand to buy a horse, and I didn't. I went to 600, 650 or something like that, and the horse was passed in at 650. So I went over to see the bloke after a few minutes. I said, mate, I'll give you the 650. He said, no, I want 700. I said, I'll give you 670. He said, no, mate, I want 700. So I said, oh, mate, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll toss you 650 or 700. He said, okay. So I pulled a coin out of my pocket, and as it happened, it was a $2 coin. Could have been anything. And I said to him, well, the deal is you can toss it, I will. You toss it. I said, okay. I said, I'll toss it up in the air, land on the floor, tails, 650, heads, 700. Yeah, okay. So I tossed it up in the air, came down, and the other bloke went and looked at it and said, it's a head. I said, oh, I owe you 700. I said, you mind if I have a look? So I pulled it up. I showed the other bloke. I said, what's that? He said, it's a tail. I said, so it is. 650. So I'm 50 rand better off straight away. The interesting thing, have a look at a $2 coin. There's a head on both sides. You know? And I didn't know that. But when you look, there's a proper head on one side, but there's another head on the other side. So I'm 50 grand better off. And then I said to a few of my mates, I said, someone tosses a coin up in the air, do you ever have a look? Or do you say, oh no, that's it? I reckon half the people in this room would have said, I don't want to look. And the other half would have said, shit, it's 50 grand, I better have a look. Right?
Which says something about buying horses as well, and the type of people who do. Who's got a question for us? Come on. There must be a question. I've got one down here. You got a microphone down there? A tip for the races tomorrow.
I never bet. It's a mugs game, and I'm one of the mugs that are in the business, but I've got enough brains to not bet. I don't bet, so I never give tips.
All right, next question. Come on, a couple of quick questions for it. Just yell them out. Oh, for goodness sakes, this is terrible. You got Gerry Harvey sitting there, you can't even give him a question. Come on, somebody must have a question for him.
Problem with, people say to you, you walk everywhere and everyone knows you, and they say, do you get sick of that? No, not, you just g'day, you know. Just be nice to people. And a lot of people recognise you. You go everywhere. Does it worry you?
No.
It doesn't worry me.
No.
But a lot of people would say, I don't want to be in that position, you know, because everywhere you go. Just imagine you're a young bloke and you had girlfriends all over the place.
Can you imagine that? That'd be sensational. They'd all talk to each other, though. That'll be the problem. Tell me how did you meet Singo for the first time?
I met Singo when we were in our 20s. I had my business and he had his little advertising agency. And someone had recommended he came to see me. So he rolls up and he's got his little brochure. And he said, my name's John Singleton. Oh, hello, mate, how are you? So I sat him down on a carpet roll. And in those days we used to smoke. And he put his brochure down and we're having a little bit of a chat. And I used his brochure as an ashtray. And he said, mate, you didn't read my brochure. I said, mate, I'm not interested in your brochure. And so we had a good talk, and the next thing we know, he's doing my ads. And we developed a great friendship over all those years, and he taught me advertising because at the time, he probably still is one of the best promoters in the business. He's got a wonderful brain because everyone's talking around here or something and he's on the edge somewhere else. And so over the years we did, a hell of a lot of great promotions and all that sort of thing. And we still see each other quite a lot.
So is he the one who convinced you to voice the ads yourself?
No. I only did that because when I started off again, I only did that because it didn't cost any money. and I hate spending money. So if I can figure out how to do something that doesn't cost, then I'll take the cheap alternative 9 times out of 10.
I'll tell you what, it's a great story, there is no doubt, and it really does cover the gamuts. Imagine a kid in his garage at the age of 12 looking at his old man with the house burnt out and basically saying, I don't think my old man's up to much and I've got to get out of this garage in some way, shape or form in my life. To suddenly finding yourself not only having created a business that is as big here in Australia but overseas, and then also doing it through basically plenty of graft and also the skill as a salesman, which is Gerry Harvey personified. Can I just say the story is a brilliant one. We could have gone for hours, I would suggest to you. But Gerry, always great to have a chat, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Ross.